talk about this question of blue wave with our next guest. We're excited to have Congresswoman Judy Chu. She's from California's 27th District, a Democrat. Welcome, Congresswoman.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here, Congresswoman. This was a big week for politics with the historic midterm races. What did you think of the results?
I was thrilled. It looks like we have at least 35 seats now that we've gained, and I think that more are yet to come because we have about 100,000 ballots that have not been counted in California. So I think we're going to see some solid gains over there.
Congresswoman, before we get to anything else, this was a great opportunity for, first and foremost, your leader in the House, Nancy Pelosi, who has been the speaker before, the first female speaker, is on track to be the next speaker again. But what does your caucus think about that? There are some members and incoming Congress people who have said point blank they're not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi. I know that in certain districts, for example, in neighboring New Jersey where we are, that there are people like Congresswoman-elect from the 11th District who beat Rodney Frelinghuysen, Mikey Sherrill, who said that she won't vote for Nancy Pelosi. Her next door mate, Tom Malinowski, who beat Congressman Lance, said the same. What's your sense? Is Nancy Pelosi going to make it, or is there going to be a fight for leadership?
I think Nancy Pelosi will indeed make it. She is the best person to be speaker. She has the experience. She has the knowledge. She is the one that we can say actually solidified this victory here for the Democrats in this election. And I also don't see anybody who can actually succeed in a race against her. I don't think that anybody else has the numbers, the votes, nor the experience to be able to lead the Democratic caucus forward.
So, and in terms of Nancy Pelosi, she has said that if she assumes the speakership, that impeachment would be off the table. Do you think that that's true? Do you think Democrats are going to play nice? Because I wrote a CNN op-ed about this, that if they were to proceed with impeachment, they might very well see what Republicans saw. They had significant losses in the House and Senate after they impeached President Clinton.
Well, what she is talking about is the fact that we need to have the Mueller investigation first. We need to make sure that the evidence is there for any kind of action going forward. But to do that before we have the evidence, before Mueller is able to complete the investigation, that is too premature.
But Congresswoman, there are certain things the House can do that they don't need to wait for Robert Mueller on. For example, they can get the president's tax returns and make those public, or at least take a look at them to see if there's anything untoward there. The president said earlier this week that if that's what, in fact, the House does, that if they investigate him and his taxes, which is separate from Robert Mueller, that the Senate is going to investigate them, which I think Mitch McConnell might find as a surprise. But is that something that Democrats are considering? I know that Congressman Pascrell has made a big deal out of getting the president's taxes. Is that something that the Democratic majority is going to do, or are they going to focus more on legislative priorities that they've been waiting a long time to pass?
Oh, I am a very enthusiastic proponent for getting Trump's tax returns, and I happen to be a member of the Committee of Jurisdiction. The tax law says that the chair of Ways and Means can subpoena Trump's tax returns, and there are actually only two positions in Congress that allow for that, and that's the chair of Ways and Means and the Senate Finance Chair, who is Republican. Hence, we know they're not going to do it. Now we have the ability to do it. I know that Richie Neal, who is currently ranking member and will soon be chair, has said that he will first ask for Trump to voluntarily give up his tax returns, but that then he will follow up by asking for a subpoena for Trump's tax returns. And I think that it's important for us to take that step because we need to know what Trump's financial dealings are.
Well, I know many Republicans, including Mitt Romney, have said in the past that they would support or that the President Trump should release his tax reform returns to be transparent. But Congresswoman, I want to change the subject a little bit to talk about an issue that I hope we could find some bipartisan agreement on, the opioid crisis. I know that you've co-sponsored a bill on this. Tell us a bit about this bill, and do you think that this is something that we might hopefully, this is a theme we try to work on with Bold TV to bring both sides together. Tell us about that work, and do you see a bipartisan path forward?
Yes. Now, many people think of Washington, D.C. as totally polarized, but actually there are instances that never get the headlines, but where we do work together in a bipartisan manner. And the opioid crisis is one of those. We actually passed a bill, H.R. 6, and that was signed into law on October 24th. H.R. 6 included numerous provisions that were done on a bipartisan basis, and it in fact included 3 of my bills that were co-sponsored by Congress members on the other side of the aisle. So both Democrats and Republicans came together, and the most high profile of the 3 provisions of mine was the sober living bill. It had come to my attention through a constituent of mine that there was his best friend that died who was living in a sober living home. And he died unnecessarily because he could have had his life saved through naloxone, which is a drug that can reverse the effects of an overdose. But this sober living home did not even have it on the premises. And as a result, this young man died a premature death. So my bill says that there needs to be best practices that are developed, and they will be developed by our federal drug agencies that will provide guidelines for sober living homes, and then it gives incentives for them to implement that.
And so that's a separate bill from the one that was passed in October?
Well, actually, what happens in Congress is that you have numerous bills out there, and they can incorporate all of them into one bill. So I was fortunate enough to have my sober living bill incorporated into the big bill that was passed and signed into law on October 24th.
Oh, excellent. That's
Congressman, I have one final question for you. We're talking about bipartisanship, and certainly the opioid crisis is one place where hopefully both sides can find accommodation. What about infrastructure? It's something the president had talked about. I don't know how many infrastructure weeks, quote unquote, we've had that seem to be taken over by some crisis that's manufactured by the White House,
or the media.
But is there something that the White House and the Democratic majority can at least come to terms on? For example, infrastructure. Is that something you support?
It is my hope that we could come together on the infrastructure bill. I think that all of us who are Congress members, who have constituents, know that there is a crying need, and so many of our districts are facing an aging infrastructure. Not only that, this could create very good new jobs that pay well, and that would be a stimulus to the economy. So it is my hope that we can indeed come together on this.
And Congresswoman, you are a leader in the Asian American caucus in the House. What has the opioid crisis, how has that impacted the Asian American community?
The opioid crisis has affected every community, young and old, and people of different ethnic backgrounds. That's why I have taken such a proactive view on this and taken these measures that were ultimately included in H.R. 6. And I do have to say that it's affected my own backyard right here in California. Actually, the drug overdose crisis is the leading cause of death for young people under 50. So we are in crisis mode, and we need to do something about it. I think that there is actually no community that's been untouched by this.
Wow. Yes. Well, and certainly this is something that the president has made a priority on the campaign trail and in the White House. Have you worked with his office at all?
Well, no, not with his office. Nonetheless, of course, he did ultimately sign the bill, H.R. 6. So he was working with the Republicans, certainly, on getting this bill ultimately to its end where it could be implemented and turned into law.
Congressman, do you think that he will work with you on issues of commonality like the opioid crisis if it were passed by a Democratic House, or do you anticipate that we're going to just have rank partisanship for the next 2 years?
Well, it would certainly be my hope that he would work with us. After all, the reality now is that Democrats are in control of Congress, and it would be to his benefit to work with us on issues of common concern. I certainly hope that he doesn't hold certain of his issues like the border wall as hostage for common sense reforms that could help move this country forward. We certainly are willing to do that. We're eager to do that, in fact, and I hope that this is a time for us to come together and move America forward.
And Congresswoman, Julie had mentioned the infrastructure, and we talked about that. Infrastructure, when I hear that word, I'm concerned about the deficit. And I know that congressional Republicans passed a budget that expanded and ballooned the deficit, and I was very disappointed by that. Would House Democrats work with the Senate to work on the deficit issue?
Well, I was so disappointed that the Republicans passed the tax bill. The tax bill actually increased the deficit by $2.3 trillion, and that actually is the leading cause for the deficit. So I would hope that they would rethink that. And I know that as a member of the Ways and Means Committee, we are going to hold hearings right away on the consequences of the tax bill and how it has increased the deficit in this country. We need to think of ways to stop it, because if we have this deficit, then the ultimate inevitability is that there will be cuts to Medicare and to Medicaid. And we cannot have that, because these are the main sources of health care for millions of Americans.
Congresswoman, do you see that the Senate might actually take that up? I know that Paul Ryan, before obviously he lost the House and the Republicans lost the House, had talked about entitlement cuts. Do you see that Mitch McConnell might try to do that in the Senate? And is that something you expect to be fighting in the House in the next term?
He actually talked about doing that.
Right.
So this is a reality. This is of tremendous concern. I would be surprised if he actually did it, though, because Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid are very, very popular programs in this country, and it would be to his detriment if he did that.
Congresswoman, we have a viewer comment here that I wanted to throw up. Johnson Jaipal says, opioid issues are related in this situation to drug trafficking cartels. So you mentioned the border wall previously, and that's something that the president has very much said, that we have a lot of the opioids and drugs flowing into the country because we don't have sufficient protection at the border. In order to solve, because the opioid crisis is a priority for you, would you support a border wall or just stronger security at the southern border to stop the flow of drugs?
I definitely would support increased security measures. And I have listened to the experts who said that actually what we need is greater technology at the border. We need smart technology that can detect the drugs that come over. I do have a concern with the drug cartels being able to smuggle these drugs in, and they do it through increasingly clever ways. But there are ways to detect these drugs as they come over the border through these kinds of detectors that they have now that can see which drugs are being brought in and how they are smuggled. So I definitely think we need to have smart measures that can do that. But I think that the border wall, as envisioned by President Trump, is an incredible boondoggle that will cost anywhere between $20 billion to $40 billion. All
right, Congresswoman, we're going to leave it right there. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you.